Hey friends, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Happy start to our new reading plan.
Yeah, welcome to day one.
Yes,
we're excited.
Okay, so today we started out with the book of John in chapter 1, and I think it's so appropriate and perfect because we get to read the Christmas story. I love how John just said, we're going to do the abridged version.
That's right.
We don't need all the details. And we have the Christmas story, we have an introduction of who John the Baptist is, and we get to even hear here is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Is that familiar?
That was Advent, right?
That's right.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Here's what I like about John. I like that John starts at the most kind of appropriate spot. So Matthew is going to start with going back to Abraham and tracing the line of Jesus up through his current time, which tells us that Jesus wasn't the last resort plan for God trying to finally work something out. That even Jesus's whole life, even his family heritage, had led to the point of him coming into the world. Luke is going to start the gospel with the Christmas story. He's going to start with nativity. He's going to start with shepherds and angels and a moving star. Mark is not going to deal with any of that. Mark is going to get straight to
Fewer details than John.
Yeah, Mark is going to be fast. Matter of fact, Mark's favorite word is the word immediately because he wants to go quick. John says, you know what? The story of Jesus doesn't really begin in Bethlehem. The story of Jesus really begins at the beginning. And the book of beginnings is Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And look, and then John starts out, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this reminds me of, like, sometimes I like to read, okay? So I'll read books, and it'll explain a whole, like, what's going on in a story from a character's point of view. And then it'll shift where another character is telling what's happening during the same story, but it's from their perspective. So Moses in Genesis 1 is telling us how God created the world. John is going to come back and he's going to take that same moment and he's going to talk about Jesus's role within that same moment. And so John wants people to know, all these readers to know, that Jesus he's not just a teacher. He's not just a preacher. He's not just a leader. Jesus is God. He is God in the flesh. Why? Because John's going to tell you the intent of the book at the end. He says, these things have been written so that you may know that Jesus is the Son of God and that by believing you may have life in his name. So John wants you to understand exactly who Jesus is. He's going to call him the Word. So the Word has been made flesh. John, at the end of the Bible, he's going to write Revelation, and he's going to call Jesus the Alpha and the Omega. So not only is Jesus the Word, he is every letter of every word, beginning to end. Everything comes back to Jesus. He's going to call Jesus the light in this story, which one guy says that because Jesus is the light, there is no darkness that the light himself cannot defeat. But then you have just one little statement for Christmas. Verse number 9 says, that was the true light. That's Jesus. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. I mean, that's what he has to say about Christmas. Why? Right. Because for John, Christmas is not about Bethlehem. Christmas is about the fulfillment of Genesis 1:1. And that Jesus is the fulfillment. I'm gonna tell you what else I like about this. Okay, so I only saw this recently and it made me happy. Whenever you're reading through John, so he's writing John 1 through about 28, and he's telling about the theology of who Jesus is. Then he's talking about John the Baptist. Then he gets into this series of days, like verse 29. And the next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him. Verse 35. And the next day, John stood with 2 of his disciples. Verse 43. And the following day, Jesus went ahead of them into Galilee. And so John breaks down this story into days. Just like Genesis 1 says, in the beginning, start with that. And then it goes through what happened in each of those days. I love that. I got one more thing, but what else you got?
You were talking about how he goes back to the very beginning. Another way that he shows that, he talks about the law and Moses. And that's really interesting because what he says in verse 17, the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So the law isn't meant to save us. It gave us some temporary fixes in how to deal with our sin. But really, the law is the thing that reveals the problem and shows us our need for the solution, which is Jesus who comes.
I agree.
I like
agree.
that.
Okay, here's the last thing I got. Look at the very last sentence in this chapter. It says this. Remember old Nathaniel? You remember Nathaniel?
Yes.
He says, can anything good come out of that?
We just talked about that.
He's a natural skeptic, which I like. Okay? So he says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Jesus said, hey, by the way, remember when you were alone and you were sitting under a tree? He said, I saw you there. And Nathaniel goes, well, nobody saw me there. So that's all it took. And he goes, you are the son of you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus said, and he said to him, most assuredly, I say to you hereafter, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And so what Jesus is in essence doing, he's talking about being the bridge between broken humanity and the God who reconciles enemies to himself to become his friends and his family. But again, what book of the Bible is John going to? John is capturing this moment by going back to Genesis. Because in Genesis, in the story of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jacob is traveling from his family. He's traveling to go find a wife. He's running from his brother, and he lays his head down at night. And this is all happening in Genesis 28. He lays his head down at night, and he has this vision of a ladder stretching from earth to heaven. And he says he sees the angels going back and forth on this. And what Jesus is saying, he says, hey, buddy, I'm the ladder. And so if Nathaniel ever wonders, how does a person get from here in this world up to the Father? Jesus is telling Nathaniel early, I am, I have been, and I always will be the only ladder. Going back to Genesis. And then he's going to explain it to everybody, but he's going to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no man comes to the Father except what? By me. And so Jesus is the ladder. There's a lot we could go through there. You got anything else?
Yes.
Okay.
That wasn't my takeaway.
Oh, okay.
So I'm kind of looking through the lens as we read through. And if I see a good and faithful servant or a characteristic of that, I'm kind of jotting it down in the margins of my Bible. And so with John the Baptist in verse 31, he said, I myself did not know him, but for this purpose I came, baptizing with water, that he might be revealed to Israel. And it just it reveals that Jesus is who gives us purpose. Any good and faithful servant, he's who gives purpose. As he goes and finds the disciples, some things that I jotted down of characteristics of good and faithful servants. They seek him. And then when they find him, they share him. They're taking others to him.
That's right.
They follow him, and then they believe him.
Yeah.
Just some characteristics that stick out that I see in other followers and good and faithful servants that I want to be like that.
I like that. Since you brought that out, I like how old John the Baptist, he was getting pretty popular. Some might even say famous. And yet when people came to him, he didn't reserve the fame for himself. He pointed it.
Kept pointing
So
away.
John's big thing was, he says, I am not the light. And yet people were drawn to him.
Mm-hmm.
So John might not have been the light, but he sure did reflect the light. He was a good and faithful servant, not the master. He was careful about that. But he is the servant. I like that. I think that's good. Yeah.
Implies humility.
There you go. There you go. Hey, listen, let's keep rolling with John. We'll see you tomorrow, day number 2. Hey, listen, if you've already done this, you've got perfect attendance in reading so far. Let's keep it up. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.